In 1790, nearly 9 out of every 10 Americans worked on farms, not because farming was romantic, but because it was necessary. Food production was the economy. Then something subtle happened before it became obvious: the invention of better farming tools, the iron plow, crop rotation, mechanical reapers, and steam power. Each innovation didn't eliminate farmers, it made them more productive. This is where Jevons paradox comes in. In the 19th century, economist William Stanley Jevons observed that when coal-powered steam engines became more efficient, coal use didn't decline. It increased. Efficiency lowered costs, and applications expanded, driving up demand. Productivity gains didn't destroy work at first. They multiplied it. Farming followed the same arc. By the late 1800s, one farmer could feed more people than ever before. With that, wages rose, output surged, and employment held. But then the curve bent. By the early 1900s, mechanized threshers, tractors, and combines began doing entire tasks end to end. By 1930, the share of Americans working in agriculture had fallen to 21%. By 1950, it was under 12%. Today, it's less than 2%. Yet food production is much higher than ever. The key insight: productivity delayed displacement, but didn't prevent it. The transition unfolded over 250 years, allowing institutions, education systems, economies, and identities to slowly adapt. What we are living through now is the same structural story, but compressed into maybe a decade, more likely only a few years. And that compression is the part humanity has never experienced before. 4 signals from this week that point to this compression. But before we jump into the signals, let me take a minute to introduce myself if you are new here. My name is Chris Schmelzer, and I serve leaders who recognize the need and understand that the old models of leading and working are no longer keeping up with the pace of change. Every week, I track the subtle signals that a massive reset is coming for what we refer to as white-collar work, and with it, so too it will change the way we need to lead. Here are 4 stories from this week that point to this massive shift. This week's first story: the quiet acceleration of corporate restructures. This week, Amazon announced plans to eliminate approximately 16,000 corporate roles, citing the need to reduce layers, increase ownership, and remove bureaucracy as part of a broader efficiency push. Pinterest followed with its own announcement: a workforce reduction affecting less than 15% of employees, framed as a restructuring to focus resources on priority initiatives, including, but not limited to, AI-driven product investments. What's notable isn't just the scale, it's the language. In 2025, restructurings were openly framed around AI-first operating models. I think we will see layoffs accelerate in 2026, but the framing is going to shift toward fiduciary responsibility, operational discipline, and long-term shareholder value. Organizations will increasingly decouple public justification from AI, not because AI isn't driving the change, but because public tolerance for that explanation will thin. The signal: the economic logic of AI is accelerating faster than organizations can openly acknowledge, and the narrative will lag the reality to protect against public backlash. This week's second story: Anthropic CEO's warning about the shape of what is coming. If you are a CEO, executive, or an aspiring leader, spend time with Dario Amadei's essay, The Adolescence of Technology. It is a good piece of thinking to better understanding what powerful AI means, not just technologically, but economically, socially, and institutionally. He lays out 5 categories of risk associated with powerful AI. 1. Loss of control over autonomous systems. 2. Destructive misuse by individuals or small groups. 3. Power concentration and authoritarian misuse by states and institutions. 4. Economic disruption through labor displacement. 5. System-level destabilization and cascading effects. For this newsletter, the 4th matters most. Amadei describes a future where economic growth accelerates while the need for human labor erodes. This is the decoupling of labor growth as a metric for economic progress. He offers a concrete example. Less than 2 years ago, large language models struggled to write functional code. Today, at Anthropic, AI systems are writing significant portions of production code for engineers. He suggests soon it will write code end to end. This is the farming curve, replayed. First, tools augment. Then, they absorb tasks. Then, they redefine the job itself. And critically, this time, the technology isn't limited to one domain. It spans the full cognitive surface area of white-collar work. The signal: sustained GDP growth may no longer translate into broad employment growth. Organizations and individuals are not psychologically prepared for that decoupling. This week's third story, 2026, is the year of intelligence explosion. Mo Gaudat, former chief business officer at Google X, frames the next phase of AI not just as acceleration, but as an intelligence explosion. And he says it will happen this year. Not because machines become sentient, but because they begin improving themselves faster than humans can supervise. This is recursive learning, systems designing better versions of themselves, shortening feedback loops, compounding capability. Gaudat's warning isn't apocalyptic, it's ethical. AI, he reminds us, has no moral polarity. It amplifies intent. And in that context, he offers 3 leadership imperatives. Agility. The future is not a predictable chessboard where you plan 5 moves ahead. It's more like a squash court. Rapid shifts, constant repositioning, and the ability to move without knowing exactly where the next hit will come from. Intelligence as a utility. AI liberates intelligence as a resource. But borrowing IQ from machines should not replace deep thinking. It should elevate how we think, validate hypotheses, and reveal blind spots. Ethics. Without ethical grounding, this capability becomes chaos. We are not just building tools, we are building actors in systems that affect billions. Ethical context must be embedded at every level. This pushes the conversation beyond what AI can do to what humans must become in response. The signal. The constraint is not technological capability. It's human maturity in how power is wielded inside systems. This week's fourth story: jobs are being rewritten faster than we can describe them. A January 2026 report from the Burning Glass Institute clarifies a crucial point. The way work is changing is not binary, not automation or augmentation. It's both. As an example, consider the marketing manager role. Previously, they coordinated agencies because creative work lived outside the company. Now creative is generated instantly, in-house. Previously, they reviewed copy because alternatives were slow and expensive to produce. Now dozens of viable variants appear in minutes. Previously, they designed and managed campaign calendars because sequencing mattered and change was costly. Now campaigns can adjust continuously in real time. The tasks didn't move to someone else. The constraints that created them disappeared, but the role didn't get lighter. As tasks vanish, expectations rise. Titles stay the same, until suddenly they don't. Their analysis of US job posting data shows that skills most exposed to automation are declining in demand. Skills that work best with AI are increasing in demand. And critically, the same jobs are often both high automation and high augmentation roles. In other words, we are not seeing a simple sorting of safe jobs versus risky jobs. Jobs aren't disappearing cleanly. They're fracturing and recomposing. There's an important caveat in this research, though. Job descriptions often lag reality. Many organizations recycle outdated postings, meaning even this data may understate the pace of change. Which raises an uncomfortable question. If our job descriptions can't keep up, what else inside our organizations is already obsolete? The signal. The safest capability going forward might be the ability to question the assumptions that skills are built on. This week's signals tell a coherent story. The work of organizations is being transformed faster than the beliefs that govern them. The economic logic is shifting faster than the narratives that explain it. And the pace of change is outstripping the human systems, biological, psychological, and institutional, designed to manage it. I imagine that Amazon's 16,000-person layoffs were not announced at the end of a calm, spacious, reflective process. Pinterest's cuts weren't either. Decisions of that scale at that speed are almost always made under intense pressure. Quarterly expectations, market reactions, board scrutiny, competitive fear. In other words, they were likely made in a high-threat, defensive state. And that's the problem. When leaders and organizations operate under sustained pressure, The nervous system shifts into survival mode. Thinking narrows. Time horizons shrink. Control feels safer than curiosity. Protecting resources, power, and position starts to masquerade as good leadership. I've seen this firsthand. As a former management consultant, I sat in hundreds of leadership meetings where smart, capable people weren't asking, "Are our assumptions still valid?" They were asking, "How do we defend what we have?" Fiefdoms formed. Information was guarded. Political safety mattered more than truth. Not because leaders were malicious, but because they were operating for survival, not sense-making. In that state, organizations don't adapt. They react. And reaction is not the same thing as adaptation, especially in an era where the pace of change is accelerating faster than human biology evolved to handle. This is why the reset we're living through can't be solved with better strategy decks, faster tool adoption, or skills training. It requires different decision-making capacity under pressure. Until leaders can create enough internal and collective regulation to step out of threat, long enough to question the assumptions their systems are built on, the fear will keep escalating, and decisions will keep hardening just as flexibility is most needed. The future will belong to leaders who can do something deceptively simple. Create enough internal regulation, in themselves and in others, to question the beliefs underneath how work is organized. Not just how we work, but why work is structured the way it is. What assumptions about value, productivity, hierarchy, and control are still valid, while more importantly, which are quietly expiring. Enlightened leadership isn't about having answers. It's about having the capacity to stay present long enough to ask better questions, and the courage to let those questions reshape the system. That is the real work ahead, and it starts far closer to the human nervous system than most organizations and leadership teams are ready to admit. Before you read another report or rework another plan, try this once this week. In a single meeting, just one, slow the room down enough to ask, what assumption are we making here that we haven't questioned in the last 2 years? Then resist the urge to answer quickly. Let the silence do its work. Notice who gets uncomfortable. Notice how fast the conversation wants to move on. That reaction is information. Because assumptions don't disappear when the world changes. They harden. We crave familiarity in pressure situations. And the leaders who are going to get this right won't be the ones with the best tools or the fastest plans. They'll be the ones who can create enough space, internally and collectively, to question the ground they're standing on as they realize it is shifting. If you try that question and it lands awkwardly, if the room resists, if you feel the pull to move on, if you notice yourself defending rather than exploring, that's not failure. That's the signal. It means you've touched something real, something that won't resolve with another strategy deck or a new operating model. This is exactly why I'm building the Change Mindset community. Not for people who want to learn about AI or optimize productivity, but for leaders who've already tried the question, felt the resistance, and realized the bottleneck isn't out there. It's in here. This is work for executives who are starting to see that the real constraint isn't technological capability or market conditions. It's our collective capacity to stay clear-headed and curious when everything in the system is screaming for certainty and control. If you felt that tension, if you've asked a version of that question and watched smart people reflexively shut it down, you're already doing the work that matters most. The community exists to help you keep doing it, not with answers or frameworks, but with the kind of support that makes it possible to stay in the question long enough for real adaptation to happen. Because the leaders who will matter in what's coming won't be the ones who moved fastest. They'll be the ones who moved most honestly about what's actually happening, what's breaking down, and what needs to be rethought from the ground up. That's the invitation behind the Change Mindset community, a place for people who feel the tension and want to do something with it, who want to lead differently, not just with sharper tools, but with deeper understanding. Join us as we explore what it means to lead, live, and work in an era of accelerating transformation. Check out the link in the description to learn more.